Good evening. My name is Mohan Kiruvilla. I'm the Dean of the School of Business at HBU. I'm also privileged to be holding the Herman Brown Endowed Chair of Business for the last 4 years. This is thanks to a generous gift from Brown Foundation many, many years ago. Okay. I want to start the program with an invocation by one of our graduating students in the School of Business, Laura Bond. After that, Dr. Robert Sloan, our president, will say a few words of welcome. Laura.
Good evening. If you'll bow your heads with me, we'll pray. Father God, we thank you for this opportunity that has been provided for us to listen to and learn from Mr. Miller. We pray that as we learn and engage our minds, you will be glorified through this time. May we take what we learn this evening and use it in such a way that not only improves us where we currently are in our lives, but also honors you. We give this time to you and pray your blessing upon it. Amen. Thank you.
Good evening. It's my privilege to offer you a word of welcome. We're so glad that you're here, glad you're on the HBU campus. I know we have many students who are here, so they know their way around quite well, but we also have some visitors to the campus, and we're really glad that you're here. We hope you'll take the opportunity, perhaps sometime when things are well lit for you or during the daytime, to look around the campus and see the changes that have taken place recently. We're enjoying this building. It's begun to seem like old hat to us, but this building is really less than 3 years old in terms of our ability to make full use of it. And so we're really thrilled to have the Morris Cultural Arts Center, this Beelan Chapel. Behind me, above you, you see signs of the Smith organ, the Sherry and Jim Smith organ that was just dedicated recently. So we've had some wonderful additions to the university, and so glad that our visitors and guests to the campus are here, and we hope you'll have the opportunity to see HBU whenever that you're afforded that. We have numerous people to introduce. I won't be introducing Pete Miller, but we're so glad that you're here. It is really quite an honor for us to have him. This Brown lecture is a very prestigious lecture that, of course, was endowed by the Brown Foundation a number of years ago. A very outstanding firm with a worldwide reputation enabled this to happen, and so we're very pleased here at HBU to be the beneficiaries of such generosity and to have been able to have over the years outstanding speakers such as Mr. Miller. If you'll look at your program, you'll see that people like Larry Kellner and others in recent years have been here. Bob Beecham, the chairman of BMC Software. We have really quite an outstanding lineup in our history, and Pete Miller is a sterling addition to that lineup. I want to introduce just a couple of people, if I may. For example, the School of Business board has been meeting today, and I know that Sue Bridges and Ernie Cockrell are here. Would you mind standing? Do we have any other board members who are here from our School of Business? Thank you for being here. We also have a few trustees or former trustees of the university who are here. I see Jack Carlson, who is former chairman of the board. Another former chairman of the board, Ray Cox, is here. And do we have other university trustees that are escaping me at the moment? So good to have you all here. Thanks for coming. And Neil is also with Jack this evening. Well, again, welcome to the university. Congratulations to the School of Business for being able to bring such an outstanding spokesperson for his industry to campus this evening. Welcome.
This is a special day for the Brown Distinguished Lecture Series. If you look at your program, this is the 25th year of the program. The first lecture was in 1984. So we are blessed to have come a long way with this lecture series. And I want to thank two people who helped me set up the event. Three people who helped me set up this event. Renju Jose from National Oil, an old-time family friend of mine, and Veronica Cantu from the Office of Advancement, and Carrie Martin from my office. We all worked together to have this evening. Thank you. Pete Miller has been the chairman and CEO of National Oil since 2001. There's a brief bio in the handout. All I would say is well accomplished when I read his detailed bio elsewhere. A graduate of West Point, and he got his MBA from Harvard, and is on the board of many companies. And thank you, Mr. Miller, for being here. And
well, thank you very much, and it's my honor to be here today. I'm actually humbled as I look at the list here of speakers in the past. My predecessor as the CEO of National Oilwell Varco was Joel Staff, and one of the members of my board of directors was Bob Beecham. And so I'm kind of following in some big footsteps, so I hope I can make a presentation today that you'll find informative and interesting. I have a couple of goals today, and I think the first one is to really let you know that the oil industry is here for a long time. I'll talk through that a little bit as I go through the presentation. The oil industry is very important to the world, not just the United States, but to the world. And it truly is a global industry. And I want you to be able to take that away from here. And the second thing, we really need young folks. You know, we're an industry that back in the 80s and the early 90s made some mistakes when it came to retaining people. And we had a big generation gap. And we're trying to fill that today. And that's why it's exciting for me to come to a place like Houston Baptist to be able to talk to a bunch of young folks to carry the message about what an industry it is that we have. And I think the third thing that I really want you to see out here today, it's a high-tech industry. You know, it may not be writing complete software for Dell. You might not get the same stock options that you get at Google, but I'm telling you, it's high-tech, and you'll see a lot of that today as I go through the presentation. Because I know you get tired of listening to me talk, so I'm going to show you a lot of cartoons so you can see the things that we really, really do. First, let me tell you a little bit about National Oilwell Varco. And I'm going to put this all in the context of mergers and acquisitions. I know many of you are business students, and M&A, mergers and acquisitions, have been very important to what we've done over the years. But just to give you a little bit of an indicator of who we are today, you know, our last big acquisition of a public company was in April of 2008, and that was a company called Grant Prideco. It was about a $7 billion deal. In 2005, we merged with Varco, hence the name National Oilwell Varco. That was probably a transformative deal. Again, two public companies coming together. It was essentially a merger of equals, but it put us in position to be able to do a lot of unique things as we go forward. Today, I didn't have them upgraded as good as I should. I said of a market cap of $15 billion. Actually, we're at about $18 billion. Now, that might sound good, but a little over a year ago, we were at $30 billion. So, you know, the vagaries and the vicissitudes of the market kind of dictate where that is. Our revenues this year will be over $14 billion, and we have 37,000 employees worldwide. 8,000 of those employees are in Houston. And I'm also pleased to say that the average age of our workforce today is below 40 years old. So we're moving in the right direction, a lot of interesting things. We are the number 200 on the Fortune 500 list, and we're in the S&P 100. So we built the company. But to put that in perspective, in 1996, we had 1,200 employees and we did $400 million. So there's been a lot of growth. And let me show you where a lot of that growth has come from. In the last 10 years, we've done over 150 acquisitions. That's about one acquisition a month, 1.5 maybe. And that is really part of our DNA, if you will. You know, we want to have acquisitions. We want to grow through acquisition. We think we know how to do it. You'll note here we have 700 facilities around the world. We're in 50 countries. And more importantly, and much more complexity, is that we do business in 29 different currencies. And so it's really a worldwide business. Today, out of the $14 billion, about half of that is outside of the United States. So I tell people, we're a Houston-based company, simply that's because this is where I live. You know, the sun never sets on National Oilwell Varco, and I'll show you a little bit of a rendition on that pretty soon. But the fact is that it's a global business, it's an exciting business, and just to kind of give you the perspective, I flew back in from China yesterday afternoon. So I'm spending a lot of time on the road, and most of our folks spend an awful lot of time getting out to other countries and seeing how things work. So that's kind of the perspective of what National Oilwell is all about. So I'll get out of my advertising mode at this point and start talking about some things that I think are very, very important. How do you do M&A? And really there are three fundamental elements of M&A: strategy, valuation, and execution. And you can see by the size of the lettering which one I think is the most important. You know, I think too many people get hung up on valuation. You know, everybody in here can probably value a company as well as I can. As a matter of fact, you could probably do it better. You know, you probably know more about the capital asset pricing model, the cost of capital, all this kind of stuff. Heck, I forgot most of that. But the fact is, what it's really about is strategy and execution. And this is where mergers fail. You know, it's astounding to me that any consultant will tell you that well over 70% of all mergers fail. You know, think Time Warner, AOL. You know, think about some of the mobile phone companies and things like that. A lot of them fail. I would offer that out of the 150 acquisitions we've done, none of them have failed. Now, I may be lying a little bit, but I'm not going to admit which ones did. But the fact is, the vast majority of them have been very, very successful. And there's reasons for that. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. Why I believe we're successful, and why I believe if other companies would follow the same sort of template, that they in turn could be just as successful when you talk about M&A. Because it really is going to be a driver of the way that the oil business goes in the future. First, let me talk about the future of oil and gas, because strategy is what's important to us. And as we looked at this company, we had to determine what in fact is our strategy. Where do we want to grow? How do we want to do things? So you go back into the mid-90s when we kind of brought this company together. We took it private from a couple of steel companies, then took it public, and have been trying to grow it ever since in this fashion. But we took a look and said, where and how do we want to grow? Do we want to grow upstream, downstream, midstream? Do we want to grow outside of the oil business? But we took a look at the future of the oil and gas business. And I think that's important to everybody in this room, because the future of the oil and gas business, we believe, is bright. And that's what's driven our strategy. You know, here is a chart that's called peak oil. Now, you may or may not believe this, and you may or may not subscribe to the theory, but the fact of the matter is that it does appear oil is a finite resource. And as you look at it, you're going to be tailing off. Now, when you tail off is anybody's guess. You look at a lot of the big discoveries that were made, most recently offshore deepwater Brazil, and it looks like we're adding some things. But remember, if you take a look at the worldwide oil business, we're producing about 80 million barrels a day, and the decline curve is close to 10% a year. So that means you have to find 8 million barrels a day just to stay static. So it really is a business that I think is going to need more and more and more equipment as you push forward when you think about peak oil. When you think about the other resources that are out there, you know, this is a chart, and I'm going to show you some stuff that's a little dated, and then I'm going to show you the stuff that's most recent, so you'll see how cyclical all the ideas and thoughts are regarding the oil business. But if you look at this, it kind of shows what our needs are going to be in the U.S. You know, it shows you the energy consumption, and it shows oil going down, natural gas staying flat. But the interesting thing is nuclear going down, when in fact that's a heck of a solution for a lot of our problems. And you really don't see much out of wind and solar. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we're starting from such a low base point with those. To be able to achieve a lot of things is really going to be very difficult to do. If we have any growth at all in the economy, then it really is going to be extremely, extremely difficult to be able to solve our problems with that. Ergo, I kind of look at this and I say, I believe that the oil and gas business is going to be good. Now, this is just the U.S. Let me assure you, when you talk about the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, they are going to have a much greater demand for things like oil and natural gas. So you really have to look at it globally. So even if the United States is able to achieve more aggressive goals when it comes to renewable energy, the rest of the world is probably not going to achieve the same thing. What it leaves you with is the conclusion that oil and gas are really important to the future. Here's another slide that's pretty interesting. You take a look at where the vast majority of oil is today. And it's, you know, I'm really frustrated that we don't discover oil off of Hawaii. You know, instead we're in a lot of these other countries, and it's really not a whole lot of fun to go into some of them, but also it's not a whole lot of fun to be dependent upon them. And if you take a look at this, you know, I could kind of wax for hours on the things that are important on this graph, but the fact of the matter is that we're putting our energy in the hands of some people that maybe don't like us very, very much. And when you think about that, that's not a place you want to be. I think, and I'll talk about this as we go on today, but that means that gas, natural gas, where we have a lot ourselves, is going to be a much greater component of things as we push forward. But this just shows you the things that are going on around the world where the major oil and gas is. So it means you better drill for gas in the U.S., means they're going to have to continue to drill for oil in some of these areas, and it means you have to be a global company. Now let's look at today. Things have changed pretty dramatically. You know, as we take a look at this, you look at the blue line, and that kind of shows you the demand, and the red line was the spare capacity. Well, today there's a lot more spare capacity. One would opine on that, well, that's because we're drilling too much. No, that's because the economy around the world is in the tank. You know, I thought it was very interesting the other day, one of our senators said, gosh, we're already about 10% toward our goal on carbon simply because the economy's down. Well, that's a heck of a way to get to our goal. I mean, do we want to continue to destroy jobs so we can have less carbon out there? I don't think that's where I want to be. But if you look at this, it really kind of shows you what's happened in the last year in the economy. And the tendency then is to think that we have too much oil, and many of the projects that have been put on the table have been pushed out. When those projects get pushed out, that just means the future is going to be that much brighter when those projects are brought back onto the table. Then you take a look, this one I love, and this is the actual chart of oil prices. And anybody that's crazy enough to want to forecast the price of oil, good luck. And if you look on here, we're up to $147, and it was never going to go lower. Then we went down to 40, and it was never going to go higher. And now we're sitting at around 80, and it's just going to go to the right. And you know, I learned a long time ago, if you're going to forecast, if you give numbers, don't give dates. And if you give dates, don't give numbers, okay? And if you adhere to that rule, you'll be fine. And I think the prognosticators on oil are kind of in the same place. So you see today, you look at what I showed you earlier, and you go, okay, this is the right business to be in. You look at these two charts, and you go, man, I don't think this is very nourishing at all. You know, you ought to try to do something different. So if you live in the moment, you're going to be in trouble. But here's the energy consumption that is really being dictated around the world. And if you'll note, that's moving up. Many people think that the difference between today and the future is going to be taken care of with renewables, and I'm telling you, that's not going to happen. You know, oil and gas are going to be very, very important to the worldwide, to everybody worldwide, and it'll go through my grandson. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And you can see the energy consumption. I mean, when I was in China this past week, I was astounded at the number of cars that are on the road compared to the first trip I made over there about 13 years ago. You know, it's transformative. You're seeing the same thing in India, you're seeing the same thing in Brazil. So the world needs a lot of oil. What's that mean? Well, this one's my credo. You know, when you think about strategy, it's not what's today, it's what's in the future. And Wayne Gretzky said, you know, I'm good because everybody else skates where the puck is, I skate where the puck's going. And what we're trying to do in this company strategically is go where the puck's going. We want to make sure that we're building for the future, not for that chart that I showed you that says, oh, there's too much oil out there. You know, because that's not going to last. The puck's going into a different place. So as you think strategically, think about that. You know, where are we going in the future? How are we going to get there? Where do we want to be? How do we want to position the company? That's really kind of the fundamental philosophy behind the strategy of National Oilwell Varco. That's how we're building the company. That's where we want to go. What's that mean? That means that we want to provide all of the equipment that we can on the biggest drilling ships that are out there. And this is a good example of it right here. You know, this is what I call the Big Kahuna. This is a drill ship that can drill to 10,000 feet of water. Everything on here is the type of thing that we do. You'll see that here's a control cabin. I talked about high tech. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a moment or two. But you can see the control cabin. You can see one interesting thing here is note, you don't see many people. You don't see people around the rotary table. I won't get too technical. That's what turns the pipe. You don't see people out on the floor. You don't see people in harm's way. You see a ship here that is highly technical. This actually isn't even moored offshore. It positions itself over the well dynamically. There's a satellite that tells it where to be all the time, and it has thrusters that move it to the side to keep it over the wellbore. You know, when people talk about rocket science, quite frankly, this stuff's rocket science. And it's drilling in 12,000 feet of water. So think about that. It doesn't even put the bit in the ground until it goes down 2 miles. And it's able to do that in places like Brazil, Gulf of Mexico, West Africa. This is the type of technology that we develop in my company. We put this together. We have the engineers, we have the software people, we have everyone that's associated with building a rig like that. 12 years ago, we could barely have provided about $5 million worth of equipment on this rig. Today, we provide $250 million worth of equipment on this rig. The total rig itself is about $700 million, with the rest going to the shipyard. So you can see the expense associated with it, but it's really, really neat technology. The other thing you have to understand about this business, when we decided that what we wanted to do, and if any of you hear old rock and rollers, you know, this is Neil Young, Rust Never Sleeps. That was a big album he came out with. Actually, it's not 1999, but 1979. I wish I wasn't old enough to remember, but I am. But the fact is that a lot of the equipment that's in the field today is rusting. It's not going to be able to, you think of a drilling rig like you think of your car. And your car is great, and a 1980s car is great, but it's great for a Saturday morning. You'd much rather have a 2009 car to drive around town. And rust never does sleep. That kind of indicates to us the type of equipment we need to purchase and the type of equipment that we need to have out there for our customers that we manufacture. This is a blowout preventer system that goes on the ocean floor. When I say rust never sleeps, we're actually submersing this in the ocean. And this will go down to 10,000 feet. Now remember, I told you that drill ship is just kind of centered right over the well, and it's dynamically positioned. Now this is pretty nifty here, because what we do is we lower this blowout preventer, and we lower it to the bottom of the ocean, and it's able to find the top of the well and settle in over the well. You'll kind of see it enter the water, and there's nothing guiding it. You know, the ship's kind of staying in the right place. We've got a remote-operated vehicle, an ROV at the bottom. You'll see it here in just a second. But it goes through the ocean water and comes down. And then we center it over the well. And as that centers over the well, that's your first line of protection of something going wrong on that particular well. Here it centers over. That's the ROV at the top of the screen. And you'll see it. Now, we're able to go back to the surface. Now, this is 2 miles down, and we send a signal to close this in case you have a well problem, and boom, it goes down, closes the rams immediately. So you're able to secure the well. That's the type of stuff that we can do offshore. You know, it's really nifty science. And again, the complexity, when you think about the electronics that are associated with being able to do stuff like this, is really interesting things. And I think this is the sort of thing that's going to have to be done in the future. Today, there are about 100 rigs that can do what I'm showing you. And you think about that, and people think historically, those 100 rigs, that's a lot of them, but I would offer that 75% of the world's surface is water. And you think about 100 rigs, there's 100 rigs working in South Texas. Imagine how many rigs you need around the rest of the world to be able to handle the need for oil and gas. And also, it's in the water the entire time. Rust never sleeps, builds business. Good strategic decision to have equipment like this out there that you sell. I talked about the age of the rig fleet. Here's an example of the age that you're looking at today. You know, if you look here, a lot of the rigs were born in the 70s, and many of the people in this room, you weren't born in the 70s. And you look at, a lot of them were born in the 80s, and then you look at what's born in the 90s, hardly anything. That was a Great Depression in this industry. And you look at what we built in the 2000s. So again, this led us to believe that we needed to have more and more companies and more capability to be able to provide this industry with the equipment that it needs. We had to have more engineers, we had to have more software writers, and we had to have the people capable of doing that. So this data kind of gave us what we needed to know strategically to be able to continue to build the company. You know, many people think when you do 150 acquisitions in 10 years that you're just kind of out there willy-nilly doing everything, but I can tell you, every one of the companies that we've bought has had a reason. It's had a reason behind it, and a lot of the reason was to fulfill the issues that I'm bringing out to you today. You know, here's the aging rig fleet here. You see what's less than 10 years old, and you see what's older than 10 years. The other interesting thing is the technology. You know, and I show you this technology that's out there, and it can do things that these other rigs just can't do. And so again, I use the car analogy. Your car today, with its GPS and Bluetooth and everything else, can do things that a car built in 1975 or 1980, 85, even 95 cannot do. And so we're seeing a tremendous demand, a pent-up demand, that wants our equipment so they can resolve some of the issues that they face in the future. We're using a lot of equipment. You know, everybody in here has probably heard of shale wells. You know, the shale wells are the great, it's really been kind of the great leap forward for natural gas over the last few years. You know, we used to know that there was gas in shale, but we drilled right through shale. And the shale formation may have only been about 15 or 20 feet thick, and it wasn't enough to make the gas commercial. What we learned how to do, though, is turn, and I'll show you that in just a moment, but we could drill horizontally in that shale. So now, instead of just having a 4-foot section, we had a 4-foot section for the next 2 miles. And then we went in with fracturing fluid, high horsepower, high pressure, fractured it, broke it down, and that's how it started producing natural gas. And that's what you hear about today when people start talking about the production of natural gas. You know, the United States can be the Saudi Arabia of gas production if we allow it to happen. And the reason we've been able to do that is because of the technology that I've shown you here. We're using more consumables. You know, I throw this chart up. It's kind of busy, and if you don't know much about the business, what it does tell you, though, is you're using more and more drill pipe. Ergo, we bought Grant Prideco about 1.5 years because they were the world's largest manufacturer of drill pipe. Also, you used a lot more drill bits. And so we bought Grant Prideco because they had one of the largest suppliers of drill bits. And these drill bits are what allows a lot of the shale formations that I'm talking about today to be drilled. So what I want to point out is all the things that we've done have been done because of the strategic direction that we established, given the facts that presented themselves to us. And they're facts that we think are future facts, not current facts, and they're facts that are going to pay off well into the next decade. So these are kind of the reasons behind what we've done. And it all kind of leads to a rig like this. You know, I showed you the big offshore rig, but this gas is going to be done by different type of rigs. This particular rig is the Drake rig. And those of you that know anything about the history of the oil and gas business, Colonel Drake discovered the first well in Titusville, Pennsylvania back in the mid-1800s. Ergo, we named it after him. He gets no royalties for the rig, but we thought the name was pretty nifty. And what this is, this particular area that I'm going to show you, this rig was created to drill in the Marcellus shales. And the Marcellus shales are located up in the Northeast. They go from West Virginia through Pennsylvania into upstate New York. You notice how mountainous it is? This rig had to be made small, it had to be made light, it had to be made so it could rig up very quickly. And again, I won't go into a lot of the technical aspects of this, but the loads are very light. It can do the switchbacks on the mountain very well, but more importantly, it could fit on a location just a little bit bigger than this room. And that's very important environmentally because you don't have to cut down trees, you don't have to make a bigger location, and from that location, you can drill many more wells. And so the technology and the demand for this natural gas really kind of created this product for us. And again, it's a pretty cool little rig. We've got a bunch of these that are working up in the Marcellus today. We only created it about a year and a half ago. But it's that kind of technology that's going to dictate what goes on. The nice thing about this is shales are all over the world. You know, they just don't exist in the United States. They're in Eastern Europe, they're in Western Europe, they're in South America, they're in China. And a rig like this is going to have applicability all over the world. So that's kind of how we came out with the strategy. We took a look. This is what we wanted to do. The other thing I'll also tell you, we believe in the uncontested marketplace. And a lot of other people didn't want to do this strategy. And that's okay, because we're going to do it, and it puts us in a great position, and we're market leaders in almost everything that we do. Now let's talk about technology, because I think that's the other big push. As you look at technology, you look at the oil industry, and you see where we've come from back in the 1860s, and that's my friend Colonel Drake. You look at what we did up into the 1915. You start to see a lot of, you're going deeper here on land. You're learning how to do things with new technology, with bits, with drilling rigs. You know, you go into the 70s. We actually drilled a well in Oklahoma over 31,000 feet. Then you started getting some of the shorter horizontal wells. And then you start taking a look at the technology that you're able to create as you go into the shallow offshore, you go into the deeper offshore, and then when I showed you the big kahuna earlier, you go into the 10,000-foot offshore. And then finally, a lot of the stuff that you see today on the Marcellus shales and that, which are the deep horizontal wells. So technology is the second part of the strategy. You've got the demand for oil and gas that we think is going to stay there. Now you have the demand for new technology. Where's that led us? That's led us to making a lot of acquisitions like bits, downhole tools. You know, here's a drilling rig, and what you're going to see here, this is a horizontally drilled well. It goes vertical, then it makes the turn, and it'll go out and drill for about another 5,000 to 10,000 feet horizontally. You can see the bits here. We have mud motors that make it turn much faster. These are all things that we bought through M&A over the years because we knew they were going to be needed to satisfy the demands of things like the shale gas and to satisfy the demands of horizontal drilling. You know, this is what's called a shock sub right here. We build that. You come further up the hole, you have hole openers, you have jars in case your pipe gets stuck. You have a lot of different equipment here that makes it a lot easier to drill these types of wells. The neat thing about it, go back to what I mentioned earlier strategically where we wanted to be, you start with that bit, you move through all the equipment that we've talked about, and you go all the way to the top of this, and everything that you see in this rendition right here is manufactured by National Oilwell Varco, and that's on purpose. You know, we wanted to be there, we wanted to be the integrated supplier, we wanted to be the company that could provide the industry with the tools that they needed worldwide. Now, we've also created, this is a kind of a super highway when you talk about technology. You know, this is the internet to the bottom of the well. And historically, information from the bottom of the well has moved up to the top of the well very slowly. It moves at about 50 bits per second. In this particular piece of equipment, we're able to move the information from the bottom of the well to the top of the well at 54,000 bits per second. Essentially, it's a super highway to the bottom of the well. Schlumberger just came to us and we created a joint venture with this technology, and everything I show you today, this is really a game changer. This is one that I think is going to redefine what we do in the future. We're going to be able to do seismic while drilling. We're going to be able to do a lot of really unique things with this. So it really is pretty swift technology. Now I want to talk about valuation. I told you I wouldn't talk much about this, and I won't. You know, to me, it's about patience, discipline, and timing. You know, patience, when we first started talking to Varco, it was in 1998. We consummated the deal in 2004. When I first started talking to Grant Prideco, it was in 2003, and we consummated the deal in 2008. We're patient people. You know, if a deal's a good deal, it'll remain a good deal. Discipline. Don't go outside. Don't chase a deal. You know, I tell my wife every time we look at a new house, don't fall in love with the house. And guess what? She falls in love with the house, okay? And that's going to cost you money. And Renju's here with us from my M&A group, and I tell him, don't fall in love with the deal. And so we don't fall in love with the deal. We're disciplined. We make sure that we pay about the same amount for almost any deal that we look at on a relative basis. And you don't go chasing a deal. You know, if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. It's no big deal. You move on to the next one. And timing. Timing's everything. You know, in a bad market, you know, in a good market, everybody thinks they're beautiful. In a bad market, they don't think they look so nice. So you have to kind of wait around on the timing and hope you can catch it when they don't think they look quite so good. But that's really pretty simple stuff, to be honest with you. Do your due diligence, get the valuation out there. So you got the strategy over here, leads you to what you want to buy, and now, absolutely the most important thing we do is execution. How do we make sure once we do a deal that we get it right? And if you're looking at M&A deals, and if you want to take any take home from this, this is it. You know, it's how do you execute? How do you make sure you get things right? And we've got kind of 4 fundamental principles. You start early. You be real clear on what's negotiable and what's not negotiable. You get people engaged. You win the hearts and the minds. You show them it's a good place to work. When you win the hearts and the minds, it makes it a much easier deal. And you act with urgency. You have to ensure that you don't keep pushing things out, that you do them immediately. And if you do these things, you're going to be in great shape. You know, let me talk about each one individually, just so you can kind of see the types of things that we do, and we can tell you how we kind of look at it. You know, when you start early, you got to get both organizations involved. You have to get them understanding the vision that you have. You look at different ways to get people working together very, very rapidly. And you also hope that 1 + 1 is much greater than 2. That's where you really want to be. You get the synergies out of it, whether they be soft synergies in sales, whether they be hard synergies in cost savings, but you really make an effort to get those sorts of things done. And if you do that, you're going to win the hearts and the minds, and you're going to win the game. A good example of this, we have 3 companies here. One was National Oilwell, one was Varco, and one was Hydrolift, a Norwegian company we bought. We threw together an engineering team, and these guys all came from different parts of the company. And we tasked them to create a new product within a year, which is pretty fast. When you look at new product development, getting it into the field within a year is pretty neat. These guys created a new top drive. And I won't go into why this is so cool, but there's a lot of elements of it that are much better than the current piece of equipment that's out there. And each one of them shared their ideas, shared their thoughts, and were able to put this piece of equipment together. We tasked them to do it in a year. They did it in about 7 months. And they were able to go out on location after they put it together and be able to kind of join hands together and look at what they'd created. What this did is it brought those organizations together very, very rapidly. This is an example of how we did that. How we brought these folks together and made sure that everybody, whether they were Hydrolift, Varco, or National Oilwell, felt like they were part of the team, felt like they'd bought into the company. Be clear on the non-negotiables. There's some things that we're just not going to negotiate. One of the things in our company is financials. We have every financial person in the company answers up to the chief financial officer, who then in turn answers to me. They don't answer to operations guys. I have one goal when it comes to finances, and that's to stay out of jail. Well, actually, I have 2 goals. I want to be profitable, but I think staying out of jail is just as important. And we don't want our financial people being influenced by operators that want to make a little bit more money on the side. So that's non-negotiable. And we want to understand the company, why were they successful? We don't waste time debating the non-negotiables. We're clear on what's not on the table, and we really free people up to work on other things. When you do that, it gives them a sense of, okay, not that many things have changed. We're going to go up on financially and do things a certain way. We're going to do things a certain way in IT. But those are non-negotiable, so I'm going to push them aside. I'm not going to fight the fight anymore, and I'm going to go ahead and do the job as best I can. This is important because here I kind of give you an example. The red dots are where we are all over the world. And when I talk about the non-negotiables on finance, imagine if we let each one of those red dots run their own financials. And today, I don't even show you some of the things that we've got in South America. This is a little dated, but you can kind of see where we're moving all over the world. We have to have non-negotiables on that. It has to be done in a certain way. We understand the cultures, we respect the different cultures, but at the end of the day, you got to do things our way. That's the reason. If you let them do it, well, this is the way we always did it in Norway, or this is the way we always did it in China, then you're going to go to jail. So the fact of the matter is that's why you have to be so critical on the non-negotiables. The other thing is make sure you understand the cultures and understand the value of what you're acquiring. This is a good example right here. This is our cyber-based chair. We actually bought a Norwegian company so that we could get this. And this controls everything that I've shown you before. We bought a company out of Stavanger, Norway, and the reason for doing it is because in Norway, all the bright young kids want to work in the oil field. Today, you want to go to Google or Dell or Microsoft, but the folks that come out of Trondheim and Bergen universities in Norway want to work in the oil field because that's so important to Norway. We bought this company, and by having these electronics, this really redefined the way we were able to do business. And I also like to point out that this chair that we developed for this was done with an ergonomic study, and this is actually the driver's seat of a Porsche 911. So when the driller's sitting in it, he thinks he's going real, real fast. So it's kind of a nifty deal. But doing those things, the non-negotiables, knowing what the acquired company is really important with, I think have really created a situation where we're able to make people feel at home and they feel like they want to be part of this company. Get people engaged. You want to make sure you focus on the critical issues. Accountability is huge for us. Make sure that they understand what accountability is all about. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Be accountable. We don't have politics. We want you to make sure it's accountable. Focus on relationships, how you get along. It's not about the color of the trucks. I've seen too many companies that come in and say, change the signs and change color of the trucks immediately. That doesn't get you anywhere. It's about relationships. It's about the people. It's about managing appropriately. We've probably got some signs out there that are 3 or 4 years old that still don't say NOV. And I don't lose any sleep over it, as long as the people are NOV and as long as they're moving in the right direction. And then do cultural integration and masquerade it as products. Make them think that they're working on a big project, but the reality is you want the cultures coming together. People ask me a lot, do you have a company culture? I said, no, you can't. When you're in 50 different countries, there's 50 different cultures. We have company processes, we have a company way of doing things, but we'll never be all of the same culture. You have to respect those cultures, but you have to bring them together. One of the ways we do this is through training. We have training facilities all over the world. We've got them here in Houston. We're in Kristiansand, Stavanger, Macaé, Brazil. And we bring all the people together and start showing them a lot about what NOV is all about. We talk about the mission. We bring people in and give them an idea of what the company is all about and how they can prosper in the company. That helps to really bring the folks together and I think create a successful environment when you're talking about M&A. These folks come in, they get excited, they get charged up about what it is we're trying to do, and they really become part of the organization. As they become part of the organization, it's probably just like freshman orientation here. You orient them, you bring them in, you make them feel like they're part of the university, and away you go. Makes it that much easier. And we do this, we invest a lot of money in it, but we think that the investment is paid back tenfold because of all the different things and the skills and the beliefs that people bring into the organization and the way they start working together immediately. Now, this is a very, very important to ensure that they're brought into us and they feel the NOV methodology. Don't have to change their culture, but just learn about our processes and learn that you work with a bunch of good people. If you do that, you'll be very successful. We also bring them together on projects. Masquerading again, it kind of like what I showed you back on the top drive. This is a rig we asked some of our Norwegians, some of our Chinese folks, because most of this rig is manufactured in China, and some of our engineers here in the U.S., and we tasked them to put together a rig that could really be run by one person. And this is an example of what they created. We took a lot of the technology that we developed offshore, that big rig that I showed you initially, we brought it onto land. We took some of the pipe handling equipment. You had to make it much smaller, much cheaper, because the land guys are a lot cheaper, and you had to bring all that together and create a rig like this. And by doing that, it really brought the different cultures together. It brought everybody together kind of on a shared focus, and it made them feel a lot better about the grouping of people that they were with. And it also, quite frankly, created a very profitable piece of equipment for National Oilwell Varco. So those are the types of things that we do. And then finally, act with urgency. When you look at it, integration issues don't improve with age. If you don't look at it, if you don't change it, those of you, when you go back to your dorm room or your apartment, those clothes that were lying on the floor this morning, they don't move if you keep them there. They're still going to be there tomorrow morning and the morning after. You have to act with urgency. You have to change the problems right now. Set aggressive goals, hit short-term expectations, and then pull the trigger at close. Don't let anybody be standing up in the air and worrying what's going to happen to them in the next 3 or 4 months. Make it happen right away. We did this a lot, again, looking at problems and looking at new products, and we acted with urgency. This is a pipe handling system here that we had, and we weren't getting anything right. When we bought Varco, or when Varco merged with National Oilwell, we put together teams immediately to act with urgency to solve problems. This was a huge problem for our customers, and these teams came together. They didn't let it linger any longer. It had been lingering in the past. Everybody got together, created a solution to it, and we were able to put this into the field, and it's kind of neat stuff. It's all robotics, but we created this really under the fusion of two companies. We made sure that we got value out of it, but the real value was getting people to act with urgency, to understand that problems weren't going to go away, to get out there and solve these problems immediately, to be able to take care of the things that were on the table. Once we instilled that virtue, if you will, into both organizations, it's one that has withstood the test of time. That's one of the reasons that we've been very successful in getting our products into the field and being able to do the things that we do today. And we finally kind of took a look at how we could make sure, when you talk about high tech, how we can monitor this and how we can have the sense of urgency around the world. These rigs I'm showing you, the big rig that I showed you initially gets $700,000 a day. And if that rig goes down for a day, the people that own it lose $700,000. And it used to take a long time for us to fly people out to the rig. Today, because we've made smart equipment, what we do is we monitor all these rigs around the world from different locations around the world 24/7. This is an example of our situation room in Houston. You see Norway right there, you see Singapore, and you see Houston. And we're able to look at rigs around the world and solve a lot of the problems. As you've noted, much of the equipment that we make today is controlled through PLC and electronics. It's not necessarily mechanical. A gear doesn't break, a bearing doesn't wash out. What happens is the software wipes out. But we're able to then sit in a place like Houston, resolve the problems of rigs as far away as West Africa, and resolve what normally would have taken a week, and resolve it in about 10 minutes. So now you think about a rig being down for a week at $700,000 a day versus a rig being down for 10 minutes. Big differential. But by acting with urgency, we were able to create this environment throughout the company that allowed us to be able to do these things to take care of our customers. So those are the things that are very, very important when it comes to execution. The final part of this is stay the course. You know, when you make a commitment, don't back up. You know, things are liable to be tough. Things are liable not to work out initially the way you wanted them to. We bought a company in Norway one time that when we bought it, the backlog was just dropping off the top of the table. And everybody said it was a bad deal. About a year later, it paid for itself in earnings in one quarter. So it wasn't such a bad deal. But you have to stay the course. And you have to take care of not listening to Wall Street. You know, I know there's a few Wall Street guys here, so ignore me or put something in your ears right now. But don't listen to Wall Street. You know, you've got to do what's right. Remember what Gretzky said. Stock buybacks are a big deal. Now, M&A is a big deal. Growth of the company is a big deal. You know, dividends, they're important. And in some cases, you need to pay them. But in a cyclical industry like this, it's tough to do. Acquisitions that make no sense, don't do them. Reinvest in new capacity, okay. But stay the course. Don't let Wall Street dictate to you how you're going to run your company. It's difficult to do. It's a difficult thing many, many times because when you kind of get voted on every day by what your company's stock price is. And you want it to be as high as you can, but you also have to make sure you're taking care of the company for the next 100 years, which is what we try to do. So that's kind of a quick run through of what we do. It's about mergers and acquisitions, but more importantly, it's about the process that we use. I think it's about making sure that people are engaged, making sure that you have a company that understands what it's doing, understand where it's going. And I'll also tell you it's a great industry for young kids. You know, I would tell you, I would encourage anyone here to look hard at the oil and gas business. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. If you don't like to travel, I'd look someplace else. But if you like traveling, if you like excitement, I think if you like being part of what's extremely important, you know, the world needs oil and gas. It creates a better standard of living for people around the world. I'm not sure the world needs more investment bankers. But I do know that it does need oil and gas. And, you know, to me, there's a lot of things you want to do in your life. And one of the things is you want to have meaning in your life. You know, you want to have a good family, you want to have good friends, but you also want to make sure you're in a career that's fulfilling and a career that makes you feel good about what you're doing and helping society and helping mankind. And I would suggest that the oil business does that. You know, when you look at where we've been able to go around the world, when you look at the value that's been created because of energy, I think it's pretty exciting. So I would encourage all of you to take a good look at the oil and gas business, and I hope that this presentation today has given you some ideas about it. It's high tech, it's exciting, and it's international. And I would invite anybody that would like to give it a shot because it's a great business. So with that, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. We do the BOP stack, and we do not do the ROV. But it's a good idea, and maybe we'll buy one. No, we've actually looked at ROV companies, and the problem with an ROV is each one's kind of a one-off, and we try to make our products, you want to get on a learning curve, but we do, we've got a great market position on the BOPs. Yeah, we do, our BOP is called Schaffer, and it's out on West Little York, and we have a great market position with it, and it's neat. And ultimately, we'll take another look at ROVs, but they're so engineering intensive and one-off that we've just never thought that was really the right place to be. Yes, ma'am. I think that the future is really going to be ultimately renewables. But I think it's not going to be renewables as we see them today. I think you're going to be able to do a lot of different things. I think actually the future is going to be in hydrogen, and it's going to be in water. And I think you have to figure out a way to bring water to the fore and hydrogen to the fore to be able to really create the renewables. Because fact of the matter is windmills are fine, but just don't build them off Nantucket. Just don't do it in my backyard. And solar power is wonderful, except when you're in the Gobi Desert or when you're out in California and about 3 inches of dust build up on that, you have to use water to clean it off. And what's the scarce resource on the West Coast? It's water. So there are a lot of different things like that I think are going to be very difficult to handle. But I think what science will ultimately do is figure out how to do things with hydrogen. And as you figure out how to do things with hydrogen, I think that's going to provide you with a renewable fuel that's almost going to be limitless. But I think that's also not necessarily going to be in any of our lifetimes. I think we're going to make advances. But that's why we're so excited about natural gas, because I think natural gas is a wonderful bridge fuel. And we haven't even scratched the surface. And I'd be remiss to tell you what I think the reserves on natural gas are. But clearly, they go into the next century. There's a lot out there. Yeah, that's a great question. We started a program about 5 years ago called the Next Gen program, in which we kind of fanned out all over the country. And we looked for people from universities that really had not much to do with oil and gas. And quite frankly, we also looked for liberal arts students. I wanted kids that knew the word perhaps, or, what about this? And when I had so many engineers and 1 + 1 equals 2.00000000, and I wanted somebody that would go 1 + 1, that's someplace between 1.5 and 2.5. And that's where we've really looked for liberal arts students. We've looked for bright students. We want folks to be inquisitive. We want them to have curiosity. Quite frankly, we don't want them to really respect command and control very much. I hate organizational charts. I think when you put somebody in a box, they're limited by that box. I know we have organizational charts in my company, but nobody shows them to me. You know, my philosophy is you have to be a self-starter. You have to be someone that comes into an organization and you can kind of look at the lay of the land and you can kind of move where you want to move. And that's what we see with a lot of the young kids today. They kind of gravitate to where they want to go, right, Lindsay? They kind of look around, they say, here's the things I'd like to do. And it really is about curiosity, I think, more than anything, and it's about engaging in teamwork. And I think if you can do those things, you'll be successful. The degree doesn't matter. You know, I'm an engineer, I think, and I can't even tell you what courses I took, let alone what I learned in the darn courses. And I think it's the curiosity and the ability to work with teams and the ability to know who has the strengths and be able to go to those people and parlay their knowledge into helping you and helping the organization. So that's kind of that's an amorphous way, but it's kind of one of those things. We know what we're looking for. It's hard to describe, but it really has to do with curiosity and teamwork and really just being a good person. Well, thank you so very much. I appreciated being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You talked about liberal arts background and bright students. I will tell you, you've come to the right place here. Thank you. Thank you very much.